Hi guys, happy Friday. So today we're going to be talking about a couple articles, history articles, and I'm just going to walk you through them. We're going to talk about them, and this will be your unit test next week. So make sure you're paying attention. I'm not going to give you any of the answers, but we might get kind of close to them. Let's read. This is called Race to the Rescue by Lisa Torrey. And remember, while we read, we're thinking about what the main idea is, what it's all about, okay? Cause and effect relationships, those details, asking ourselves questions while we read. So let's take a look. In the winter of 1925, a deadly disease broke out in Nome, Alaska. The disease was a serious threat to the children who lived there. Only one kind of medicine could stop the disease from spreading. However, the medicine was in Anchorage, Alaska, and Anchorage was nearly 1,000 miles away from Nome. People were in a hurry to get the medicine from Anchorage to Nome. There was an old mail route called the Iditarod Trail. It linked the two towns, but the trip along the route would be very hard. The route was covered with snow and ice. The howling winds were bitter cold. Rough mountains covered part of the route. Their only hope was to use sled dogs. Sled dogs could endure the long, cold journey. They could get the medicine quickly to Nome. The journey begins. More than 20 mushers, or drivers, put together teams of sled dogs. Each team played a key part in the relay to race the medicine to Nome. The first team soon left Anchorage on the first leg of the trip. Reporters wrote articles about the heroic race to deliver the medicine to Nome. People all around the world read these reports in newspapers. They followed each leg of the journey. They became caught up in the drama that was taking place in Alaska, and they cheered for the dog sled teams. Amazingly, the team on the final stretch of the journey arrived in Nome only 6 days later. The musher drove his dog sled team into Nome on February 2nd, 1925. The team brought the medicine that would keep the children in Nome safe. A husky named Balto was at the lead. Soon people all over the world saw pictures of Balto. People everywhere recognized his black furry face and sparkling eyes. In 1926, a group of people built a statue in honor of Balto. They placed the statue in Central Park in New York City. Balto died in 1933. Over 40 years later, remember those words that tell us when things are happening, people in Alaska wanted to honor the heroic race that brought the medicine to Nome. They also wanted the race to celebrate Alaska and the important role of sled dogs. The Alaskans held a sled dog race in 1967. It was a much shorter distance compared to the 1925 route. The first official Iditarod race was held in 1973. The trail covers nearly 1,200 miles. The race has been held every year since then. Mushers and their teams of sled dogs come from all over to compete. It is called the last great race on Earth. All right. And look, right here we have a sentence. We have a question that says, which sentence from the passage best states the main idea of the article? Okay, so we want to look for something, a detail from the story that tells us what it's mostly about. All right, and that's tough. So you have to pick the one that really identifies the main point of the story. Okay. So for your work today in Seesaw, this is what we're going to be doing. Paragraph 2 says the trip from Anchorage to Nome was very hard. Explain why the trip was hard. Use details from paragraph 2 to support your answer. So why was the trip from Anchorage to Nome very hard? Let's look back at paragraph 2. Remember, these paragraphs are numbered. People were in a hurry to get the medicine from Anchorage to Nome. Link the two towns, but the trip along the route would be very hard. The route was covered with snow and ice. The howling winds were bitter cold, and rough mountains covered part of the route. So there's definitely some details in there. Remember, story details are just little quotes from the text. What tells us there? That the route from Anchorage to Nome was very hard. So that's our work today in Seesaw.